Inside that landing craft, two childhood friends sat in silence. The roar of the engine blended with thoughts of home, mothers, wives, brothers. They promised each other they would make it back together. But the moment the ramp dropped, the friend beside him was hit. He died before his boots ever touched the sand. That was Omaha Beach, June 6, 1944. What happened to them was not an exception. That day, thousands of soldiers faced the exact same fate. On June 6, 1944, the Allies launched the largest amphibious invasion in history. Before the sun rose over the English Channel, the greatest invasion force ever assembled moved silently toward the coast of occupied France. It was the beginning of Operation Overlord, the day that would go down in history as D-Day. For hours, the Allies believed they had done everything right. That night, American and British strategic bombers had crossed the skies over Normandy, dropping tons of explosives on German positions. Soon after, battleships and cruisers opened fire from the sea, turning the coastline into a storm of explosions. The expectation was simple. When the soldiers reached the beach, they would find shattered defenses, silenced bunkers, and minimal resistance. But that expectation was about to be brutally destroyed. The German fortifications known as the Atlantic Wall had been built and reinforced over 4 long years. Concrete bunkers, camouflaged pillboxes, minefields, barbed wire, anti-tank obstacles, and carefully calculated firing positions. And despite the bombardment, most of those defenses remained intact. Of all the beaches chosen for the landings, Utah, Gold, Juno, Sword, one would become synonymous with horror. Omaha. The American objective was clear. Land at Omaha, break through the defenses, and link up with British forces advancing from the east and American troops landing at Utah to the west. Together, they would form a continuous front against the German occupation of Normandy, but what looked like a carefully calculated plan on paper would turn into absolute chaos on the sand. To take Omaha, the United States sent more than 43,000 infantrymen. They were supported by battleships, cruisers, destroyers, amphibious tanks, and combat engineer units. On the front line were the inexperienced 29th Infantry Division and the battle-hardened 1st Infantry Division, veterans of earlier campaigns. Waiting for them, high on the bluffs, was the German 352nd Infantry Division. Unlike the static divisions defending other beaches, the 352nd was a mobile unit, made up of experienced officers, many of them veterans of the Eastern Front, men who had survived the most brutal fighting against the Red Army. They knew war, and they knew exactly what to do. Omaha Beach was a geographic nightmare, rocky cliffs at both ends. In the center, a steep escarpment rising nearly 160 feet, completely dominating the beach below. Behind it, wooded valleys formed natural corridors of death, perfect for ambushes. Every inch of the beach was covered by interlocking fields of fire. There were no safe zones, and spread across the entire shoreline were the most feared weapons of the war. The MG-42 machine guns, capable of firing 200 rounds per minute, they turned the beach into a killing ground. A 50-round belt was emptied in just 2.5 seconds. The sound they made didn't resemble gunfire. It sounded like fabric being ripped apart. Shortly after 6 a.m., the first landing craft approached the shore. The soldiers were silent. Some clutched photographs of their families. Others prayed. Many stared straight ahead at the metal ramp in front of them. Then, at 6:35 a.m., the ramps dropped. That was the moment the Germans opened fire. The pre-invasion bombardment had failed. The defenses were alive, and now fully alert. Men were hit before they ever stepped onto the beach. Entire landing craft became floating death traps filled with bodies. Amphibious tanks sank before reaching shore. Officers were killed in the opening seconds, leaving units leaderless. In some sectors, a third of the first assault wave was wiped out within minutes. Fire came from everywhere. Machine guns, mortars, heavy artillery. Those who made it off the boats advanced only a few yards before diving for cover behind obstacles, craters, or wreckage. The sand of Omaha quickly lost its golden color. It mixed with blood, smoke, and twisted steel. At the ends of the beach, the situation was even worse. There, American troops landed with no cover at all, directly under fire from the cliffs. Entire units were annihilated. Survivors were pinned down, frozen in place with nowhere to run. In the center of the beach, smoke from fires started by the bombardment allowed some groups to move forward with fewer losses. Even so, every yard gained seemed to cost dozens of lives. For hours, Omaha became a deadly stalemate. From the bluffs above, the Germans kept firing, but slowly something began to change. Allied air superiority was absolute. The Luftwaffe never showed up. American and British fighter bombers attacked any German movement, making it nearly impossible to bring in reinforcements or supplies during daylight. Little by little, small cracks began to appear. Around 8 a.m., roughly 600 American soldiers managed to reach the top of the bluffs in the central sector of the beach, exhausted, disorganized, many without officers, but alive. They began attacking German positions from the rear. The effect was devastating. Bunkers that had caused hundreds of deaths were silenced. Machine gun nests fell one by one. The once solid German defense began to collapse. By around 11 a.m., American troops forced their way into the strategically important town of Colville. The Germans attempted a counterattack, but only one battalion could be sent, and it was repelled with heavy losses. By the end of the day, Omaha had been taken, but at a terrifying cost. The Americans had secured only a fraction of the area originally planned. Pockets of German resistance were still fighting. The beachhead remained under artillery fire. The losses were staggering. The exact number was never fully confirmed, but estimates range from 5,000 to more than 6,000 American soldiers killed, wounded, or missing at Omaha. More than 50 tanks were lost, dozens of landing craft destroyed. The German 322nd Division suffered around 20% casualties, a severe blow, but one that nearly caused the invasion in that sector to collapse. At one point, General Omar Bradley, commander of the U.S. First Army, seriously considered evacuating Omaha Beach. On the British side, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery even discussed diverting forces from Gold Beach to save the sector. Of all 5 landing beaches, Omaha was by far the one where German defenders achieved their greatest success in terms of casualties inflicted and ground held. And yet, they still failed. Because despite the chaos, the fear, and the devastating losses, the Allies did not retreat. And that fragile beachhead, won at an almost unimaginable human cost, became the first step toward the liberation of Western Europe. For many, D-Day is remembered as a strategic victory. But for the men who stepped onto Omaha Beach, it was the day survival itself felt like a miracle.